blaring blatherskite. Welcome to the St. Canard Files, a Darkwing Duck podcast. I'm your host, Mike, superpowered superhero, Russo, and Will's not here tonight. He's actually super busy getting the virtual panel ready for all you guys. It's going to be fantastic, but it's taking up a lot of his time, so he couldn't be with us tonight. Fortunately, we have a couple of great guests with us. Taking the reins as my co-host tonight is, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Andrew Wallace, and too bad. I thought you were traveling hardware store.
No. And we have another special guest with us tonight. Today we are reviewing Up, and Awry. Great episode. It's got Gizmoduck, Megavolt, Candy cartoons. And speaking of Candy cartoons, our guest tonight was actually an animator over at Candy when Darkwing was being made. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Derek Bond.
So we have two new people to the podcast tonight, so I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves before we talk about the episode. Andrew, how did you get started with Darkwing Duck? What are your favorite episodes, favorite villains?
Well, my dad started me off as a great animation fan because he had bought a lot of the Looney Tunes Golden collections and a lot of the Hanna-Barbera stuff when they first got released to DVD. And he started me off with a lot of the classic Disney films, and we started going to the parks, and I just fell in love with Disney. And for the longest time, my favorite Disney character was Donald Duck. And from that, I grew to love DuckTales. One day, we found the DVD of DuckTales at a Walmart, and I fell in love with it. And then soon after, we found Darkwing Duck, and I just couldn't put it down.
So, favorite villain?
I would say Megavolt's probably my favorite villain. Great work by Dan Castellaneta. Great chemistry with Jim as Darkwing. And then I'd say this episode, Up, and Awry, or Stress to Kill would be one of my favorite episodes, excluding some of the greatest, like Life, the Negaverse, and Everything is, of course, an amazing episode. But
that's fantastic. And I want everyone to know this. How old are you, Andrew?
I'm 14.
I cannot believe you are so well spoken. You know so much about cartoons and all sorts of things, even like the Three Stooges. I've never heard a 14-year-old talk about the Three Stooges. I'm very impressed, man.
Thank you, Mike.
It's great to have you on with us tonight.
It's my pleasure. And
Derek, you animated for Candy Cartoons. Can you tell us how you got your start at that company?
Sure. Early 1990, I was a student at Sheridan College, and one night I was working late. I think I was the only one in the lab, and two guys came in and just started putting notifications down around desks, and one of them came over and started to talk to me a little bit and wanted to see the animation I was doing, and flipped it and gave me some pointers and tips, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And it turns out that they were it was Glenn Kennedy himself and one of his senior animators, Johnny Williamson. So they left a bunch of contact info around, and I just happened to get nominated to be the contact person for all the students that they had left info for. Right. So I set up the calls, set up the interviews, went down and started animating. So we graduated in end of April, and we started animating at the beginning of June of 90. So Darkwing Duck would have started probably, I'm thinking late 90 into early 91.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based on the script schedules, that seems about right.
Yeah, and we did 6 or 7, I think it was, 6 or 7 episodes, and then moved on to the Disney afternoon animation.
I remember Kennedy did Goof Troop, Bonkers, and Aladdin.
Yep.
Did you work on all those shows?
Yeah, yes, I did. And it was Darkwing Duck that really Like I got my feet wet with Tiny Toons, but Darkwing was a huge evolution for me as an animator and as an artist. Getting a chance to work with senior animators and look at what was being done, it was a fantastic growth opportunity.
Yeah, Kennedy definitely grew between working on Tiny Toons and then working on Darkwing Duck. Their quality shot up when they started working with Disney.
Yeah, well, when we were on Tiny Toons, I think we had almost 60 different animators, and they were doing so many episodes over, I think we had 4 weeks an episode, maybe even less. I'm not even sure. It was such a hectic schedule. And then by the time Disney Television, we got over there, that pared down to at least half of that.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time Darkwing finished and we moved on to other shows, I think that pared down again to about 20.
Right.
Fortunately, each time I made the cut and got to work more and more.
I think Kennedy's style really fits Darkwing Duck. Darkwing Duck is such a zany show with a very simple aesthetic to the characters and just world, the universe, that Kennedy's style really works for it.
Yeah, at times.
Well, sometimes it isn't perfect. We all know one Kennedy episode that kind of goes off the rails completely. But this episode, Jurassic Jumble, and especially Dry Hard are really fantastic episodes.
Yeah, those were some of my favorites to work on.
Derek, did you have any particular Darkwing characters you really enjoyed animating?
Oh, I loved animating Goslin. She was always so much fun to listen to the voice actor and get the inspiration for. The Liquidator was one of my favorite villains to animate. In this episode, I had so much fun with Megavolt. So many things. A lot of great memories about it. Yeah.
Now, Will wouldn't let me. Will would not be happy if I didn't ask you this one. Did you work on Quackerjack at all?
I did. I had very limited scenes in. I'm forgetting the name of the episode.
Whiffle While You Work.
Whiffle While You Work. Yeah, I had a couple of small scenes in that. I did animate Quackerjack. I think it was one scene of Quackerjack. Near the end, when the chattering teeth are jumping around Darkwing Duck in the ring, and where he's wearing the robe and the gloves.
Oh yes,
that's my scene.
Oh, okay. Now I have to go back and watch that.
Yeah. So he there's two scenes there. He has, I think he reacts to the teeth, and then there's a close up of him saying homing devices.
Ah.
And that was me. The only scene I animated of Quackerjack was right near the end when he jumps off the railroad onto the floating disc. It's all of like 2 seconds. So
that's a very solid piece of animation of him, though. It goes by really fast, but it's a very solid drawing.
Yeah. So
but
yes, I can't say animated on it, but
there's some really bad animation of Quackerjack in that episode, but it works with him. It works with him because the character is so crazy.
Especially his first scene.
Oh yeah, well that's the great John McClanahan. I know I've talked about him before. Who is not on this episode, sadly. He did not do anything for Up and Awry.
No, unfortunately, no.
But he was a great animator. Got to work on Animaniacs. He was really, he had a fantastic style.
Oh, I loved it. Anytime I got a chance to bookend a scene with him or something, it was so inspirational to work from or work with. I never got to talk to him.
He wasn't subcontracted with Kennedy after Darkwing. He moved on to do his own thing. I would have loved to have seen his stuff on Goof Troop or Bonkers.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that would have been good. Yeah, he was brilliant.
So let's jump into this episode, Up and Awry. We know the title. We know what that's based on. Mm-hmm. Up and away. Up and away, right? And it was the original air date for this one was Thursday, November 14th, 1991. It was 39th in production order, so a little deeper in there. But it's not too late. Our story editor in this one was Kevin Crosby Hops. He definitely worked on a lot of the good ones. And our writer this time around is Dev Ross. She was fantastic. Remember, she wrote Fungus Among Us, so she is definitely one of the better Darkwing writers.
Oh, that was a good episode.
Yeah, she's a great writer, and that one's just fantastic. Props to Disney Australia. And the animation was, of course, who animated this one?
Kennedy Cartoons.
Kennedy Cartoons. This is their 4th out of 6 episodes. So yeah, let's start talking about this episode. Andrew, where does it take place? Where do we begin?
Well, we start at a horsing race
Mm-hmm.
in the stables.
Yep.
It turns 13 horses have been missing in a week.
Yes, we get the return of a voice actor we haven't seen in a while. Scott Bullock, we haven't seen him. He usually voices Tom Lockjaw. I don't think he's been on the show since Justice Ducks, but here he is voicing the jockey. And I know it's him because Scott Bullock uses this wise guy voice on other characters in Timon and Pumbaa and Bonkers. So I know it's definitely him. I don't know who's voicing the cop.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we have a jockey. All these horses are missing. But is Darkwing on the case?
Oh, yes, he is.
Derek.
Disguised.
Yes, he's in disguise. Derek, what's his disguise?
Oh, him and Launchpad are disguised as a horse.
They are disguised as a horse. Darkwing takes the head off the horse long enough for us to know it's him and puts it back on.
The disguise for the horse reminded me a lot of an episode of the Scooby-Doo show from 1976, I believe. It was.
Oh, yeah?
The Headless Horseman of Halloween. Scooby-Doo and his cousin Scooby-Dum were dressed as a horse for a Halloween party, and it strikingly resembles Darkwing and Launchpad.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, too? There's a really old Bob Clampett cartoon called The Gruesome Twosome, where two stupid cats are in a horse suit, and Tweety puts a bee in the rump, and the whole thing goes crazy, flying all over the place. But Derek, you told me that was probably not an inspiration, huh?
I don't think it was. We had such limited resources back, 1990, 91. Like, it was VHS and whatever was available on VHS or 16 millimeter film.
So, back then those old Bob Clampett cartoons weren't as easily available as the later stuff by Chuck Jones and Fritz Freeling. So I get that.
That was the more marketable shorts at the time. Yeah,
well, there was those shorts were split up into 2 groups. The later cartoons were a lot more widespread on TV back then. So yeah, because the jockey shows up and thinks Darkwing and Launchpad are his horse, and jumps on its back, and Darkwing stuck being part of the horse race. And as the race is going on, what happens, Andrew? What happens to all the horses?
Well, their horseshoes get magnetized, and they're going up, and away into the sky.
Who's behind this plot?
Well, it's everyone's favorite shocking rodent, Megavolt.
Yeah, and in terms of air date, we actually haven't seen Megavolt in about a month and a half. He hasn't been seen since Justice Ducks. So it's been a while since we've seen him, and it's been really great to see him. It's great to have him back. And what is he wearing on his head?
A 10-gallon hat.
Yeah, he's all dressed up for the occasion.
Howdy, cowboy.
Howdy, cowboy. And so Darkwing attempts to stop Megavolt. He grabs his lucky horseshoe, and it doesn't go well. Here's something interesting about this episode. Tiff of the Titans, Darkwing, and Gizmoduck, they seem really evenly matched. Like, both of them are pretty competent superheroes. Right. In this one, Darkwing can't do anything right. No, it's just he gets shown up at every turn by Gizmoduck. And speaking of Gizmoduck, Derek, who shows up?
Well, Mr. Gizmoduck.
There he is in all his glory.
Everyone's favorite helmet head.
Yep. I like him in this episode. I feel like Hamilton Camp is being directed to include a lot more Fenton Crackshell in the voice. And is definitely a better range to him. I don't think this is my favorite Gizmoduck episode because that's definitely Tiff of the Titans. But this one is a lot of fun. One thing I'll point out, I guess maybe Kennedy wasn't familiar with him, but there's some crazy animation inconsistencies with him.
Especially his tire.
Yeah, in this scene though, he's flying with no propeller. He's hovering in the he's hovering in the air.
Yeah, it looked when I watched the sequence. Now I didn't work on that sequence, but it looked like it might have been a storyboard issue where the storyboard had forgot it.
Yeah.
So because every type of action he took was like he was a jet fighter, and not with the propeller on his head. So
and Gizmoduck doesn't move like that.
Yes, those things happen sometimes, and it is an issue. But yeah, so it's just strange.
And this isn't even the fault of the animation. I think the Foley people forgot to add the sound effects of the Gizmo suit, and you never hear his motor running. Those things are like Gizmoduck staples. If he's in a scene in any episode of DuckTales or Darkwing, you hear his motor running, and every movement he makes, you hear the suit moving. There is none of that in this episode.
No, none of it.
It's always, he has signature sound effects that were imported over from DuckTales. None of that makes it into this episode. But anyway, he still directed really good, the vocal effects and everything. So he doesn't capture Megavolt, but he does save the horses.
Mm-hmm. Now Darkwing went splat.
Oh, splat. Now I get it. And then Darkwing, of course, immediately has the hissy fit because here comes Gizmoduck acting like everybody's hero. And he's in town promoting his new book. And when Darkwing,
a major motion picture.
Yeah, I would go see it.
Absolutely.
And when Darkwing demands the glory, Gizmoduck just hands him the giant thing that Megavolt was using to capture the horses, and crushes him with it. This is not a good one for Darkwing's ego.
Oh no.
No, he takes it on the chin pretty hard.
Yeah, like out of all the episodes where he has to deal with Gizmoduck, this is the one where he can't deal.
He loses it.
He really does. Speaking of S. Scott Bullock, we got Tom Lockjaw back. I know Will jokes that I love this character. I do like him. He's got a very brief appearance here. I've always appreciated how they always remember to bring in Tom Lockjaw as a news reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Lockjaw, he says, I always love this when Darkwing does this. He says, St. Canardians are sure to sleep better tonight. And Darkwing in the chair goes, St. Canardians are sure to sleep better tonight. 3 out of 5 episodes with Gizmoduck, Darkwing mocks him like that.
Go ahead.
So Derek, you love animating for Goslin. So talk about what happens in the next Goslin scene.
Well, you've got Darkwing's trying to rid himself of the whole Gizmoduck thing, and of course Goslin walks in wearing all the Gizmoduck merchandise, the T-shirt and
Gizmo-burger.
Gizmoduck Happy Meal, and it's a great dig for Darkwing.
I would have bought a Gizmoduck Happy Meal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, me too.
It comes with a free shirt.
A free shirt.
If it came with a free shirt.
Not a lot of Goslin in this one. A very minor role, but I do like that she's in it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, DW tries to rid himself of Gizmoduck TV, and he pulls out a book. And of course, who's on the cover of that comic book?
Yeah,
Gizmoduck.
Darkwing's take when he sees the book is very Kennedy cartoons.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very rubbery, like, shock look. They do that very good. No, like, crazy Kennedy, like, smears when characters are moving fast, but still fun stuff.
Yes.
And so Goslin makes a comment about, I'll be back when you're done reestablishing your ego. and you don't see it. You don't see Darkwing at all. You just see his arm enter the shot and claw at the arm of the chair.
I love that animation.
It's really good. So Launchpad is tinkering with the Thunder Quack. It's up on the lift, and one of them mentions Glory. So of course, who has to show up?
Why, Gizmoduck?
Gizmoduck.
Don't you ever knock?
Yeah. Doesn't Megavolt always say that to Darkwing? Always says it to him. It's funny to hear Darkwing say it to somebody else.
Oh yes. And of course, it has to be Gizmoduck.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite Gizmoduck bits in the episode. He comes in and he says, "The new Gizmoduck doll is defective. It has a screw loose." And Darkwing goes, "And that surprises him." And then Gizmoduck says, "It's supposed to fly and say, 'Beware evildoers,' but instead it wets and says, 'Mama.'" Oh well, I just have my people sue their people.
Darkwing gets a lot of jabs at Gizmoduck this episode.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so before anything else happens, a certain villain makes an appearance again.
Gee, who could it be?
It's Lilliput. No, it's Megavolt again. Derek, what is Megavolt doing?
Oh, let me. Oh, sorry, I've drawn a blank.
Oh, he's hanging upside down from his blimp, cutting the cables to the bridge.
Using
That's
his buzzy
right. That's where his
buzzsaw.
buzzy little buzzsaw.
Yeah, so if it hasn't already been established, he's collecting things. First the horseshoes and now metal cables.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of a plot that hasn't been explained yet. We don't know exactly what he's doing. But without the cables, the bridge is starting to droop.
But Gizmoduck asked if DW wants to team up with him first.
Oh, no, Darkwing wants no part of that. I mean, the last time they teamed up, they beat Steelbeak. I don't know why he'd say no, but that's Darkwing for you.
To shreds.
Yeah, but Gizmoduck would require a contract, wouldn't he?
Yes.
Like, I don't know if even I'd want to work with him. I love Gizmoduck very much, but after a while, he's too much of a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, Gizmoduck can't save the day because the winch is stuck to the back of his costume.
Mm-hmm.
So off goes Darkwing to save the day. Someone tell me how that goes for Darkwing.
That goes very badly.
Very badly. He gets an entrance. His only one of the episode. He says, "I am the blown fuse that blacks you out." And since it's Megavolt, of course it has to be relevant.
Must you always introduce yourself?
Must you always introduce yourself? Yeah. And Megavolt uses electricity to cut the rope he's hanging from. Mm-hmm. And twice Darkwing falls from a very high space. I love the sound effects whenever he falls. They use a quacking noise. He falls like quack. It tones down the violence just a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Well,
So
there's a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of that cartoon violence in these shows.
They get away with a lot of that with Darkwing Duck. Definitely. So long story short, he ends up in the bay, about to be eaten by sharks.
Now, these sharks, I thought the design was a little odd when they gave them little arms.
Yeah, it's kind of cool when they're like, when he sees them and the camera pans past them and they're like, slapping their hands together like, yeah, we're going to get this guy.
Uh-huh.
But the cartoons, the sharks are very cartoony.
Mm-hmm. Even as an animator, I thought they were not particularly well done.
No, it's a little much.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not me. And that's the problem too, is you've got as 4 or 5 of them, all with their jaws open and making noise. And anytime you have 4 or 5 characters, that quintuples the amount of work that you've got to do. And you're still, you don't get the extra pay for that. It's one flat rate for animating, regardless of what you get to work with.
Yeah, which explains why Darkwing Doubloon was a nightmare, right?
Oh, yeah.
But we will not say any more about that one. So it's time for Gizmoduck to save the day. Mm-hmm. He does try to get away with the winch, but accidentally pulls the Thunderquack on top of him in Launchpad. But, Gizmoduck goes and saves the day. He grabs Darkwing right out of the jaws of a shark. And that's just pathetic. Poor Darkwing. And this is another
he had that shark right where he wanted him.
Yeah, and Andrew, I think you mentioned there's a problem with Gizmoduck's tire in the sequence.
Yes.
What is happening?
Well, Gizmoduck flies up to Megavolt's blimp, but his tire is far too large.
His tire takes up about half his body size. Mm-hmm. And it's spinning the entire time.
Right.
His tire should not spin if he isn't on the ground. I'll give you this. Gizmoduck is hard to draw. I'm sure he's even harder to animate because he's so stiff and clunky.
Mm-hmm.
Because outside of his mouth, he can't do much expressiveness with him, so I totally get it.
Right.
But I do think it's funny to see this gigantic tire taking up half his body size. So he pops Megavolt's blimp
Mm-hmm.
and defeats him. Pretty easily too.
Hauls him off to jail.
So we get a TV news clip. We actually get the return of a DuckTales character. Anybody remember who this is?
Would that be Barbara Wawa?
Yeah, Webra Walters. She
Webra
was.
Walters.
Yeah, she originally was from DuckTales. On DuckTales, she was voiced by Joan Gerber, who voiced Mrs. Beakley and Glittering Goldie. Here, she's not voiced by Joan Gerber. She's actually voiced by a voice actress neither me or Will have gotten to talk about yet. Amazingly, she's voiced by the great Tress MacNeille.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah, for this one scene. I don't even know if she does anything else on Darkwing Duck, but she's voicing Webra Walters, and we all know who Tress MacNeille is. Babs Bunny, Gadget, Dot. She's been Daisy Duck for 20 years. She's on Simpsons,
iconic.
Futurama. Everybody knows who Tress MacNeille is. I don't have to go too much into her resume because second only to June Foray, she's one of the greatest female voice actors who's ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's iconic.
I don't think anybody would argue that. And interestingly, even though the character is called Webra Walters on DuckTales, Gizmoduck calls her Barb.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right. That's where I got my mistake from.
yeah, it's totally, it's a total, easy mistake to make if he calls her Barb. So you see Gizmoduck in jail, Megavolt in jail. Gizmoduck is totally sucking up the glory, and Darkwing decides he needs superpowers too.
Mm-hmm.
Someone tell me the crazy thing Darkwing does next.
Oh, it's one of my favorite sequences. He's got this giant ray gun, Space 50 style ray gun pointed at him, and he's gonna shoot the I can't remember the type of rays, but like mega gamma beta rays or something.
Yeah.
And of course you see him starting to almost Hulk out, become the Incredible Hulk kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just turns into a crispy critter and dissolves into dust with his eyes bouncing off. Like very, very classic cartoony.
With the exception of possibly Bonkers, I can't think of any other Disney characters you could do that to.
Mm-hmm.
Just dissolve into eyeballs. That's
Yes.
that's a straight out Tex Avery kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. When DW was transforming and it looked like he was turning into the Hulk, it was very reminiscent to me of the classic Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk. The opening.
Totally.
It also reminded me of the old Tom and Jerry cartoon, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Mouse, when Tom drinks all the milk, gets huge, and then it explodes and he turns into a tiny little mouse-sized cat. That definitely reminds me of that too. So Darkwing gives up his quest to be superpowered. He just throws in the towel. That was humiliating enough.
Mm-hmm.
But Gizmoduck comes up with an idea.
A super suit.
A super suit. How ridiculous does this thing look?
It's a great barrel.
It's like, I guess it's like a trash can or a barrel. It has like a fan blade on the back of it. He has roller skates on his feet. He looks ridiculous. He's excited though.
The rockets inside or on the side are hilarious.
Yeah. So Darkwing goes off with Gizmoduck for a superpowered superhero training lesson. Now, I love the animation in this scene when they're flying over St. Canard. Who animated this, Derek?
Steve Baker animated a lot of that where the characters are talking. And he has such an incredible snappy style of animation, and he's so solid. Like his volumes don't fluctuate too much, and it's solid and great performance.
Yeah, we talked about him when we did Jurassic Jumble with the scene of Darkwing trying to grab the pool.
Yeah.
And he just does his hand animation, the facial expressions. I love the bit where Gizmoduck pulls out the floodlight and shines it right in his face.
Yeah, you get a brief moment where he's all got the rainbow eyes.
Yeah, the spiral eyes. Oh,
Yeah.
this animation's so solid.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, they run into Megavolt's twin.
Yeah, he could have a twin. And so Darkwing goes off. He wants to do it on his own. And Gizmoduck has the great line, "You're not ready to solo yet, cadet?"
And Megavolt, of course, is, "Ooh, this is gonna hurt, isn't it?"
And we get a Schwarzenegger reference.
I'll be back.
I'll be Buck. And so we get this whole sequence where Darkwing's falling, the suit's not working anymore. Gizmoduck tries to grapple him. The two of them fall, bounce off a clothesline, fly back up in the air. It's really well animated, and it's got some great screaming from Hamilton Camp.
Gee, I guess my batteries are low.
Like I said, this is a great one because Hamilton Camp is going from the Gizmoduck voice back and forth to Fenton when it counts.
Yeah.
Like he's being heroic, but if he's screaming like Fenton. Which he doesn't do in any other Darkwing episode. I love the voice direction here. Gives him a lot more depth, like I said.
Absolutely.
And especially when he gets Darkwing on the grappling hook and he says, "I love these last-minute heroic saves. It's so invigorating," when he goes down.
Oh, yeah.
And he hangs onto the side of the building and he thinks he's going to die. It's so funny.
Oh, what an untimely demise.
And he just looks down and Darkwing's already on the ground. He's like, "Oh." It's so Fenton. And they get hit by a train.
Well, right before they get hit by a train, the look on DW's face, he looks like he's about to strangle Gizmoduck.
He's done with him.
Yep.
With him.
He's finished.
So we're getting down to our climax here. And the two of them come up to Megavolt's hideout. Now, I've always loved Megavolt's hideout, not the lighthouse he uses in some episodes, the one in the bad part of the town with the giant light switch on the front of it. And so, Derek, you animated some Megavolt stuff coming up. Please tell us about it because it's great.
Oh, it's where he's kissing his collection of horseshoes and then dumps them into the even larger pile. He's got this incredible flow. It's almost musical, his voice. And I tried to use that with his posing, like where he's like, "Goodbye, my little horseshoes." And his hand gesture sort of follows that over dramatic
and
dialogue.
There's a pause in the dialogue too, where Megavolt looks just for a second very plaintive, like, "Oh, I have to throw," like he stops. It's a really subtle animation. Like he's thinking for a second about if he wants to throw those things into the pile or not. Very good personality animation, Derek.
Thank you.
But you didn't do.
What's that?
Sorry. Go on. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No. So I did that scene. There was another animator. I can't remember who he was, but he was a brilliant technical animator. He animated the horseshoes falling into the pool, and then a grip drops down and then pulls out a giant magnet or big horseshoe.
That's great animation. That really is good technical stuff.
There's a wonderful laugh with Megavolt that I did, and then he jumps up on top of the wooden coil and puts on a turban and then starts to snake charm a piece of cable, and the cable will fly out and wrap itself around the magnet. And that's where my sequence ended there. It's
a really great sequence, and the music is also helping a lot too.
Yeah, it was so much fun to animate, and it was my first big sequence as an animator. I usually get a couple scenes here, a couple scenes there, but to get an opportunity like that and have a chance to work on a really good character piece for the villain was a dream, and it was so much fun to do.
He's Megavolt in almost every episode he's in. He just oozes personality. He must have been. Dan's voice must be so much fun to animate.
It is fantastic because you're looking for emphasis points and a rhythm and flow to it. It's so easy to animate too. You can easily pick those out.
I know I've said it before, I think on the podcast. I'll never forget when Tad Stones posted a recording session for Justice Ducks, and Dan goes, I love the smell of voltage in the evening, and everybody laughed. And the voice director, Ginny McSwain, kept saying, now, Dan, just do the laugh. Do the laugh. Oh, he was just great. So, anyway, Darkwing and Gizmoduck show up just as Megavolt's giant horseshoe bursts through the roof of his building. I notice, I wouldn't say it's an animation mistake, but Darkwing mouths the word, what's that? But nothing comes out of his mouth.
Yeah, it could be a dialogue miscue. It could be maybe it just didn't make it an editing mistake.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And another great Gizmoduck bit. Darkwing makes a reference that only one villain could have done that. And Gizmoduck is just like, who?
I'll give you 3 guesses.
And just Gizmoduck's voice. I'm sorry. Gizmoduck's voice goes from Gizmoduck to Fenton right in the middle of the sentence. He goes, oh, goody, goody, let's see. Oh, yeah, this is a hard one. Is he bigger than a breadbasket? Oh, it's like the most Fenton he sounds in any Darkwing episode. I love it. Hamilton Camp was so talented. Rest in peace.
Yeah, it's to go back and listen to it, like you said, compared to other appearances by Gizmoduck, you really get Fenton a lot, and that's in my humble opinion, it's what's missing. It's part of his character. He can't be all Gizmoduck with no Fenton.
I've heard people say that there's one negative about his appearance in Justice Ducks is that he doesn't sound right. And in that one, he's being directed to do Gizmoduck the entire way through. There is no break in his voice. It's so much funnier when the real person under the suit comes out in the dialogue.
It makes him more human.
So Darkwing goes in first to fight Megavolt. He actually gets the entrance line, I am the terror that flaps in the night, but doesn't do the metaphor. Mm-hmm. And is this now when Megavolt talks about his plot, the bigger the hull, the bigger the magnet, or is that later?
Mm-hmm. I think it's right then.
Because that's a definitive Megavolt moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the bigger the hull, the bigger the magnet. And even the musical score is like vamping him up like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just escalates and escalates and escalates, and it's fantastic.
So Darkwing's suit doesn't cooperate with him.
It malfunctions, which reminded me a lot of the Hanna-Barbera character Dynamite.
Oh, Dynamite. Suit.
Yes.
Now he's relevant again, isn't he?
Not in that new movie, sadly not.
I haven't seen it. I don't think I want to. But, that's neither here or there.
Frank Welker version of Dynamite. The classic one.
Yeah, the classic one, of course.
The only Dynamite.
So what does the suit do to Darkwing, Andrew?
Well, it gives him a haircut.
Yeah, I get the blue mohawk.
Demolition Duck.
Yeah, shades of Demolition Duck. And Megavolt says, all those do-it-yourself haircuts never worked for me either. So it's time for Megavolt to basically plug in his creation. And, the magnet. Oh, no, not yet. Gizmoduck comes back first. All cocky, hanging up, arm against the wall, telling him to come peacefully or come in pieces. The choice is yours. So what does Megavolt...
Oh, go ahead.
Go on, Andrew.
Well, Megavolt's just so bad with decision-making, he just won't make a decision.
He has his finger in his mouth as he's trying to decide. Very, very subtle animation. Love it. So he plugs in his giant super magnet, and that's the end of Gizmoduck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's now stuck to the magnet as well as 1,000 other, cars, trucks, light poles.
Everything in St. Canard.
It's really hard to see, but did anybody catch the naked woman in the bathtub?
No.
Yeah. It's a duck woman, obviously. she's you don't see anything, but she's in a bathtub. Part of everything stuck to the magnet. Mm-hmm. There's probably some crazy stuff drawn in there that I never noticed. Mm-hmm. And Darkwing 2 gets sucked up and stuck to the magnet. Mm-hmm. And
but then suddenly he just goes, no. I love the animation of the hat. He pulls it out from the cape and puts it on. Darkwing's back, and there it is.
But
Right.
before he does that, I love the dynamic animation and the angle on Megavolt when he's screaming, "My plan is working!"
Yeah, it was
And
great perspective.
and the shadows on him too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like the camera even zooms in on him too. Like you got shadows, perspective, and a camera movement.
Right. He gets a lot in this one.
And the animation of Darkwing being dragged out of the debris by his robot suit, getting pulled up, is really good too. If I have any complaint about how Gizmoduck is handled, Fenton would never say at this point in his career, "Without the suit, I'm nothing," because he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Usually in DuckTales, Fenton was able to solve problems without the suit.
Like in the when he got his suit taken away by the aliens.
And when the Metal Mites ate it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. So Fenton is not useless without the suit. But I guess you have to do that because it's really Darkwing's show.
Right. He needs to have.
Well, and that's the focus is Darkwing's trying to be something that he's not. He's forgotten who he really is, and that line really, I guess, solidifies his change back. And for writing purposes, yeah, I can see why they put it. It just may not be very characterful.
Not for Gizmoduck.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
But I'm sure most people just watching Darkwing Duck wouldn't care anyway, because, you know, you're in it for Darkwing.
Right.
So Darkwing gets back down to basics, and Megavolt depletes his power supply, trying to zap him.
Never waste electricity.
Oh, God, Megavolt gets such a brutal defeat. Someone, please tell me what happens to Megavolt. Oof.
He
And
becomes
go right ahead.
magnetized.
What happens?
He becomes magnetized.
Yeah, Darkwing wraps the cable up and plugs it in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, we get this great sustained scream from Dan. Anytime he has to laugh a lot as Megavolt or scream.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything drops off the magnet and lands on him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Derek, this is my favorite shot in the episode, and I know you did it. How does this scene end? I love it.
Well, this was a complete improv on my part. The storyboard, all the storyboard wanted was him to walk in and say, "Talk about your magnetic personality," and then walk out. And it was incredibly. It was boring. It was just a terrible shot setup. And so I've been binging a lot of Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners, and just with the way he said that line, it came to me to do the Jackie Gleason exit. You know, get the arms up and go, "Hey, hey," and shuffle out. And I had expressed the idea to my supervisor, Johnny Williamson, and he was like, "Yeah, dude, that sounds funny. Do it."
Mm-hmm.
And it took me the better part of a week, I think, 3 or 4 days for sure, just to do this scene.
Right.
And it's my favorite scene. It's in the top 5 of scenes that I've ever done. And it's amazing that it got kept in and that the music scored to it. It was a complete improv on my part, which is rare when it comes to animation.
And it's something the overseas studios never would have done. Sun Wu wouldn't have done that. Disney Japan wouldn't have done that.
They wouldn't.
Maybe Australia, but definitely you brought so much personality to that exit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what won it. It clicked. It worked. I was very fortunate.
And I feel like Philip Giffen, the composer, definitely made sure that scene was scored specifically.
I think so. Yeah.
Because this deep in production, I don't think he was scoring a lot of the episodes anymore. They were just piecing the score together. This sounds like he scored it personally,
which is incredible when you think about it. As the animator for it, yeah, it's humbling. It really is.
That's one for the animator highlight reel, Derek.
Totally.
So wrapping up, Gizmoduck is beaten up. His suit looks in terrible shape. We're in the bridge. Darkwing's advancing on him with a sledgehammer, but he's not about to beat him up. He's actually helping him pound out some dents.
Mm-hmm.
And we get our lesson. being a superpower superhero does have its disadvantages. When have you ever seen Darkwing Ducks get a dent? Andrew, tell us our final bit in this episode. How do we end?
Well, Darkwing goes to undo a dent on Gizmo's armor, and it sends him flying back with a
Boxing glove.
Boxing glove, and he goes right into a bookshelf, I believe.
Yeah, and his beak is all dented,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "Don't answer that," and the sledgehammer falls on his head.
And it zooms out.
And as he falls out of the shot, he has eyelashes and his tongue sticking out. It's the kind of drawings I think only Kennedy would do.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny. It's a great ending.
Yeah, and the way that his beak was swollen and the eyes are different, he looks like he really took a wallop.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up the episode, I'll point out this is the last time we'll see Gizmoduck in his usual armor in a Darkwing episode. We do see him in Darkwing Doubloon, but not in his usual outfit.
Pirates.
Pirate
Oh,
Gizmo.
I am not ready for that episode. But yeah, that's Up and Awry. I think it's a really underrated episode. I mean, it's got Megavolt, it's got Gizmoduck, and just some really fun Kennedy animation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a fun story. I think it's a really good episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's rate this one. As we always do, we give it a out of 5 gas canisters. I'm going to start. I'll give this one a 3.5 gas canisters. It's just that much fun, which is definitely well above average. I mean, having Megavolt and Gizmoduck in it together, I think those are the two characters that were born to go up against each other.
Absolutely.
I mean, in all but one Gizmoduck episode, he's up against Megavolt.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes sense.
And they have one little bit together in Justice Ducks.
Yeah, and they're together in Darkwing Doubloon as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I give it a 3.5. I think it's a really fun episode, and I think it's one of the top tier Kennedy ones for the show.
Mm-hmm.
So how about you, Andrew? What would you rate it?
Well, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. Because I started Darkwing with the DVDs, and this was one that really stood out to me. It was a great Gizmoduck episode because I always loved to see it when Gizmoduck would make an appearance on Darkwing, and just it has my favorite villain Megavolt in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it really stood out to me when I watched my DVDs when I was first getting into Darkwing.
It's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Derek, do you want to rate this one? I know you were involved with it, so you don't have to if you don't want to, but you're welcome to rate it.
From a personal standpoint, it's a 5.
Ooh.
No,
just because of what it means to me and etc. But in all honesty, as an episode, I think it's a pretty good episode. As in all the Darkwing Ducks, I'd give it an honest 4.
That's a great score.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's well earned too.
Absolutely.
So that
it's got a lot. Yeah, it's got a lot of good stuff in it.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But of course, that wraps up and Awry. Next week we have a big one. The return of Negaduck in an actual Negaduck episode. We're slowly finishing up our ABC Saturday morning first season ones. We'll be doing Going Nowhere Fast. So we're gonna be talking a lot about Negaduck next week. We'll be back for that one. And we got some great ones after that, guys. Negaverse, Dry Hard. Everyone listening, stay tuned, definitely. And I also want to show you guys out there listening where you can find us. We are the St. Canard Files, a Darkwing Duck podcast. We are on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes. Rate and review us on iTunes if you're listening to us on that. We are on Pocket Cast, Radio Public, every podcast app. You can speak into your Amazon Echo. It'll play the newest episode for you there. We are on iHeartRadio and Pandora. Or if you feel like it, you can listen to us on YouTube. And not just the podcast episodes. We also put up videos, ones we make ourselves, or fun stuff we find, commercials, other Darkwing Duck videos, stuff like that. So, subscribe there too. Also, you could...
channel's a treat.
Huh?
The YouTube channel is a real treat.
Yes, it is. It's definitely one you should check out. You can also join our communities. We are active on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the St. Canard Files, a Darkwing Duck podcast. And if anybody's feeling like they want to, we do Saturday night Darkwing group chats on Skype. So contact me or Will Santana about that if you want to be involved. Andrew has been involved with that too. It's a good time. We don't just talk Darkwing. And I'm going to let my guests plug themselves right now. Andrew, where can the fans find you?
Well, I'm not really on social media.
But maybe if you want to join our Darkwing Zoom hangouts, you might find Andrew there.
I'll be hanging around there.
Yep, it's always great to have Andrew on, plus many more of our friends we've made over the last few months doing this podcast. And Derek, how can the fans find you?
I have a small Instagram page that I put up things that amuse me. That I'm some art, some models, some cloud photography, and that's Arts of Ninja Viking on Instagram.
Fantastic. And Derek didn't just animate for Darkwing. He is a fan of Darkwing too.
Absolutely.
It's always great. It was wonderful to have you on tonight, Derek. It's been great talking to you about the ins and outs of Canada animation on Darkwing.
Well, thank you. It's fun to do. It's a very important part of my career and my life, and Darkwing is still probably one of the best shows I've ever worked on.
I'm so glad to hear that. And as for Andrew, this is not going to be the last we see him on our podcast. Andrew will be returning. It will be a little while, but he has another favorite episode he wanted to be on, and we'll learn more about his Darkwing interest when we get to that one. We're just pressed for time tonight. Since Will isn't here, we have 2 guests, but when we get back to Andrew on the episode Stress to Kill, we'll learn much more about his Darkwing fandom. Right, Andrew?
Sure thing, Mike.
All right, so that wraps up this episode. We will see you guys the next time, and everyone have a good night.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
No problem, anytime.
Thanks, Mike.
Stay dangerous, guys.